it's happening. After all the suspense, all my talking, yes, we're finally going to download Python on our machines. Now, based on what device you're using, the installation may change, but I'll provide videos for each one of the operating systems. So I'm on a Mac right now, and if you're using a Mac or a Linux distribution, you might have Python already installed on your machine. What do I mean? Well, if you open something called your terminal, so if I'm on my Mac and do Command space and I type in terminal, press enter. Well, right over here, if I type in Python and press enter, you see that I enter something called a REPL or a read eval print loop, where I can type Python commands like print hello. And look at that. It's working. Just like we had our REPL browser or website, I can type Python here. And most Macs come pre-installed with Python. But you might notice something here. Yep, we're using Python version 2, 2.7 to be specific. Now, as we've talked about, that is an older version of Python. Ideally, we want to install Python 3. So we're going to go to python.org and install the latest version of Python, which is 3.7. By the time you watch this video, there might be a higher version, maybe 3.8, 3.9. Now, like I said, a language is always evolving. But what I'm going to teach you in this course is going to work for any future versions of Python. So it doesn't matter if the number's a little bit off. As long as you're installing Python version 3 or up, you should be all good to go. In our case, we're on a Mac, so we're going to just click install. And you can see over here that the package is being installed. I'm going to open it up and just simply run through the commands. Want to install, click through continue. Yes, I agree to the license. I definitely read all of that. Yes, let's agree. And we're going to just continue and install Python. If you want to add your password or your fingerprint, that works too. And you see that we're finally installing our Python interpreter. All right, there it is. We have Python 3.7 installed. Now, if everything worked as planned, if I go back to my terminal and I type Python, you'll see that you have Python version 3.7 or version 3 or higher. That's good. No more Python 2. Now, depending on your machine, again, this is why installations can get tricky. You might actually not have this work. For example, in order to exit out of here, we'll say exit and then curly brackets. You might have to type Python 3. And you'll see that you might have to specify exactly the version, because if you just do Python, it'll be version 2. Now, if you encounter any problems installing Python on your machine, I will provide resources that you can see attached to this video, or you can ask questions in our Discord channel or our Q&A forum. But it looks like we finally have our Python 3 installation on our computer. Remember, we just installed our interpreter and our virtual machine, our CPython VM, in order to write Python and then evaluate that Python code. Good job. Let's take a break, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Welcome back. It's finally time to install Python, the Python interpreter that we've been talking about for so long. And if you're on Windows, this video is going to help you get set up. We're going to go to python.org, click on Downloads, and make sure that we're downloading for Windows. We're simply going to click, and I'm going to run the installer. All right. Now, this is really, really important. On Windows, you want to make sure that you click on Add Python to Path. What this is going to allow us to do is to actually open up Python and use Python from the command prompt. I'll show you that once we install this, how it works, but make sure you click on this. And also to install Launcher for all users, which is recommended. So I'm going to click Install Now. And yes, we'll say go ahead. Now you want to install based on your system. You might have an older version of Windows, a newer version. Usually the python.org website will detect your machine and know what to install, but obviously install according to what you have. In my case, it's a 32-bit system. All right, come on. All right, setup was successful. Let's close. And then what I'm going to do is actually use the command prompt here. So I'm going to type into search command prompt. If I click here, and now if I type in Python, hey, check that out. We have Python working. Awesome. Now, on Windows, you can also use something called PowerShell. And PowerShell is actually, well, I prefer it over command prompt because the same commands that work on a Linux machine or a Mac will work on PowerShell. So again, if I do Python here and hit enter, look at that. Python is working as well. So if you have Windows and you have PowerShell available, I do recommend you use PowerShell because the commands that I use in the course will most likely work with PowerShell. Another option for Windows is something called Git Bash. So if I do Git Bash, so for Git Bash, if you go to Git for Windows, you'll see here that it comes with Git Bash, which underneath the hood, what it is, it's an emulation, a bash emulation, which is a shell to allow us to use Unix commands that can be used in Mac or on Linux on the Windows machine. So that if you ever watch a tutorial where the instructor is using a Mac, for example, you can use those same commands. So to review, we have the option of using Git Bash if you want, or you have the option of using command prompt, or my personal favorite, PowerShell. So if you have PowerShell on your device, then I recommend using that, if not Git Bash. But because during our install, clicked on that checkbox that says, hey, add Python to our path variable, we're able to run this Python command and actually enter the Python REPL. Something that will become useful, and you'll see why it's useful as we go through the course. But for now, let's take a break, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Remember this slide? I told you that we're going to wait until we set up our developer environment. And up until now, we've been using a browser to run our Python code. But we want to be professional developers. And professional developers use professional tools. In our case, these are the main ones in the Python community right now. We have the terminal or command prompt, if you're on Windows, to run quick Python scripts. And we've seen this before. I can go into my terminal, type in Python or Python 3, make sure that we have that version. And then in here, I can just write any Python script that I want. I enter it, and I just run these simple scripts, and I can just exit like this. This is used for just quick testing, but most of the time, you're not going to see professional programmers use this method very often. Instead, most of the time, we use something like code editors or IDEs. Now, nothing's preventing me from writing Python code in, let's say, a Word document, a Google Docs, or a text file. But the problem with that is that, well, it just looks like text. And when you make a spelling error, when you write improper syntax where it's not Python code, if I just write it in a Word document, it's not going to tell me any information. A professional developer needs some extra tools that code editors and IDEs provide that help us be more efficient with our code. And we're going to be exploring that over the next couple of videos. But what is a code editor and an IDE, and what's the difference? We're actually going to show you how each of these work, but a simple rule is that code editors are lightweight. They give you some really nice features like auto-completion, linting, which we're going to talk about, while IDEs are full-fledged environments. That is, they provide a ton of extra stuff in order for us to just write really good code. Because of that, they tend to be bigger. You have to download a large file size, but they come with a lot of things like auto-completion, debugging, code formatting, unit testing, code snippets, so on and so forth, versus code editors where you have to just install bits and pieces and kind of create your own environment. But enough talk, let's actually install some of these, and don't worry, at the end, we'll also introduce you to this idea of a Jupyter notebook, which is one of my favorites. Let's install some developer tools. First one, and personally, this is my favorite code editor. It's Sublime Text. You can download based on whatever operating system you have. In my case, it's a Mac, so it's OS X. So I'll simply click on here and just open this up. And it's going to install Sublime Text for me. Now, Sublime Text has this model where it is free. But every time you save, maybe like every 20th time that you save, it'll have a prompt that says, hey, you should purchase Sublime Text. So if you really, really like it, it's good to contribute and actually buy it. And most of the time, the workplace that you work at will actually cover the cost. But you can also use it for free. You'll just get that annoying prompt every once in a while when you save saying, hey, buy. But you can still have all the features that you want with the free version. In my Mac, I'm going to drag it into applications. And, well, I already have Sublime Text actually installed. So I'm just going to say stop because, well, it's already installed. All right, so that's Sublime Text. And once we open it up, it'll look something like this. It's a code editor that allows me to write just like a Word document, but it has this ability to format my code and make my code look better when I'm actually coding. If I go down to the bottom here and click, you see that we have different languages that we can use. In my case, I want to use Python. So that now if I do print, look at that. I have some color completion. It gives me some hints. And let's say I make a mistake here. Well, there you go. I get some highlighting saying, hey, matching bracket could not be found. Make sure that you close this out. So immediately you can see the usefulness of this. It tells me as I'm coding along what errors I'm making. It makes the color pretty and generally is just a better experience to code. Now, with Sublime Text, this Python is actually version 2 of Python. So if I remove the brackets, it doesn't give me an error because Python 2, well, this is valid syntax. So in order to upgrade this to Python 3, we have to install a few packages. On a Mac, it's Command-Shift-P, and you'll get this drop-down menu. On Windows, it'll be Control-Shift-P. But you can also just do it this way by hitting Tools and just hitting Command Palette. And here we're going to say Install Packages. And for installing packages, we're going to say Python 3. And there's lots of packages that you can install to customize it. And there's tons of resources online of customizing your code editor. So everybody has their own preference. Now, if I click over here, I see that I now have Python 3. And if I click here, All right, everything is good. And now we can just save this file. We can call it hi.py on our desktop. And when we save this, sometimes this will switch over to Python. Now, this shouldn't matter too much. We could also do tools, command palette, and just set syntax with Python 3. And another interesting thing we can do is if we go to the command palette once again, I can say build with Python 3. When I click that, look at that. It's going to run this file for me, and it's going to say, whoa, there's an issue on line 1. It says missing parentheses in call to print. Did you mean print hello? How nice is that? So we get to fix our errors. And now if we do command palette, or if you're on a Mac, you can do Command Shift P, as you can see here, or Control Shift P if you're on Windows. I can just say build with Python 3. And now look at that. Everything is running smoothly and it prints hello. Awesome. For now, we have a basic setup for Sublime Text. We can do a lot of things, and you can Google of how you might want to customize Sublime Text. Maybe you want to change some colors. So you go to color schemes and maybe, I don't know, let's change it to Mariana. And look at that. It looks pretty good. So lots of options here. This is one of my favorite code editors, but I recommend finding your own, testing different things out and finding what you like. Usually though, the tool, like a code editor, doesn't make the programmer. You just want to get comfortable with one of them, and from there, you'll just write good code. So don't spend too much time customizing it and making it perfect, because to me personally, that's just a waste of time. Your time is better spent learning to code, actually coding, instead of finding just the best color scheme to have on your code editor. A big part of being a developer is being able to use the terminal or the command line. Well, what is it? In this video, we're going to tackle this question and teach you a couple of very useful commands. Now, on a Mac, you simply do command space and type in terminal, press enter, and then the terminal will open for you. It's one of your applications and it's on every computer. If you're on a Windows machine, then it is the command prompt. But what is it? Well, it's how humans originally communicated with computers. Up until the 1980s, it was the main way humans gave instructions to computers and computers gave output to the humans. We didn't have something called the GUI, or the graphical user interface, such as me opening up a new folder and changing the name of this folder or opening up Google Chrome. I don't really need to know how this is done behind the scenes. I just click on an icon and it opens it up magically for me. But command lines are really useful because you can do the exact same thing that you do visually on a graphical user interface, like I have here, on the command line. But they tend to be much faster to do, as I'm going to show you in this video. And there are also common ways to access different computers around the world. Like if you needed to access a server in another country where your web app is hosted, well, you would use the command line. And I'll show you how to do that later on in the course. Now, in your day-to-day job, you'll be using the terminal a lot because you'll have to access servers, the database, your front-end application, but you can do all of that in one from the terminal. You can also download scripts that other people have written from the internet so you can use in your projects. Now, these are all things I'm going to show you in the later sections. The commands that I'm about to show you work on a Mac or a Linux. For Windows, I'll have the Windows version command at the bottom of the video as we progress. Most of them are the same, but there are a few differences. So let's get started. The first command I'm going to show you is the ls command. I simply type in and press enter, and it lists everything that is in my current directory. What is my current directory? Well, I do pwd for present working directory, and I see that I'm in the users. That's my username. So I'm in my username folder, and these are all the things available to me. If I do CD, then I can go into this. If I wanted to go to, let's say, desktop, I do CD desktop. And now, if I do ls, I see that I have untitled folder because that's the only thing on my desktop right now. I can also do cd ... and this brings me back to one directory up. I can also do clear to clear up my terminal and have a nice fresh slate. There's a short command cd/, and this takes me to the root directory. If I do ls, I see that I have applications, library, system, users. That's the root directory of my Mac, essentially my Macintosh HD. I can also do cd squiggly line, and this takes me to the user directory. Let's clear this again. And if we check where we are, all right, let's change this untitled folder to something like test. Okay, let's say I'm in the user directory right now. I wanted to access desktop and then the test folder. I would simply do cd desktop and then test. And now I'm in the test folder, but there's nothing in there. So one thing we can do is I can say open dot, and it opens the folder that we're currently in. Okay, we're in the test folder. Now, if I just put this to the side over here so you can see, I can say make directory, which is make a folder, name. So name here will be whatever I want the folder to be titled. Let's just say this folder would be called web app. Did you see that? Now web app shows up in my folder. Let's change the view here so you can see it better. There you go. If I do ls now, I see that we have the web app folder, and as we know, we can go into it. And let's double click here to see what we have. We have absolutely nothing. Well, we can create a file in here by saying touch and the name of the file. So let's just do index.html. There you go, index.html. Now, what if we wanted to open this index.html? Again, we just do open, and the dot means we open the folder we're currently in, which is here. But if I do open index.html, it opens the file for us. How cool is that? But index.html is pretty empty right now. Wouldn't it be nice if we can open Sublime Text from here and add something? Again, you can do that with open. You put in A, so line A for application, and the name of the application. So Sublime Text. Close the double quotes, press enter, and look at that. I have Sublime Text. But if we wanted to do application Sublime Text and open the index.html file, we just do this. And now I can say HTML, and we'll just say, hello world. Save that. And if I do open index.html, we have our index.html file loaded. Wasn't that a lot faster than right-clicking, creating a folder, then dragging everything to Sublime Text? And as you can see, you can do things really, really fast here. Okay, let's change something. I'm going to close Google Chrome and Sublime. And in the web app, let's say I wanted to change the name of index.html to about.html. Well, I'll do the mv command, which stands for move, but it just moves the index.html file to about.html file. So it's a little trick. You're essentially just moving one file to another, but by changing the name, you create a new file and you replace it with the old one. So now I have about.html. Very cool. Now, these commands, typing them can get pretty tiring. I can press the up arrow and it goes through my entire history, which is very cool. I can also press the tab key and it will bring up my most recent command or completes what I'm about to write. So you can do it really, really fast. And when your commands get longer and longer, it's a very useful thing to do. Okay, I don't really need the about.html file anymore. Let's remove it. We do rm for remove and the name of the file, about.html. It's been removed. Perfect. Now, what about the web app file? We can remove that as well, but if I just do remove web app, well, it's not going to work. First of all, if I do ls or present working directory, I'm in the web app folder, so I need to move back to the test folder. Let's clear here, do cd. Now my present working directory is, I'm in the test, so I can remove web app by doing remove web app. But rm only works for files. To remove a directory, a folder, you need to do rm and then use the R option and then the folder name. In our case, it's the web app. There you go. It's gone. And with that, you know what? We can remove the test folder as well. We can go back to our desktop and then do remove our test. There you go. It's gone. And one last trick. On a Mac, you can do this.
This is so cool.
Right? Very, very cool. Okay. As you can see, you can have a lot of power with the terminal, and I want you to get used to writing commands on here. And from now on, try creating files and folders this way. Eventually, you'll get more and more comfortable with it, and things will be much faster than just using the GUI. In the developer environment section, I'll show you how you can change this boring black and white terminal to something like this. That's it for now.
See you in the next video. Bye-bye.
By the way, remember this exercise that we did? Where we pretended to have a picture that was stored on our computer, and we had to create this script to read through our data and add a space or a blank if there's a 0, and if there's a 1 to add a star, which gave us a little Christmas tree. And although we've been using the REPL up until now, at the end of the day, all Python code, whether you're writing Python for games, whether you're writing Python for scripts to read your Excel spreadsheets, or maybe you're using Python to do some machine learning, at the end of the day, all we're doing is, well, we're writing a program, and then this program gets run by a machine. Something like this. Here I have a 1.py file that I've just created. And in here, as you can see, we have our script that we had in our REPL. But I've just created it on my computer. It's 1.py. I can name it whatever I want. And usually a way a program runs, again, any type of Python program, any type of programming language. We can use something like our terminal. If you're on a Mac, you can use the terminal. Or if you have a Linux-based machine, you can use the terminal as well. Or if you're on a Windows computer, using the command prompt or the PowerShell. So that here, if I wanted to run the 1.py file, I make sure that my present working directory is where my file exists, which is on my desktop. Remember that on Windows, you'd say directory or dir to find out what your present working directory is. Once you're in the same directory, remember, if you're not, you can cd into different locations to get to where the file is. And then we run the file by saying Python, in our case 3, again, based on whatever interpreter you want to use, and just say 1.py. And there you go. Our graphical user interface of displaying a tree is working. And although this is a simple example, that's all code is. Code is being run by a machine like this. We just say, hey, run this Python file or multiple files through the Python interpreter. And the machine is going to do something. we created a Christmas tree generator. So that's what the machine does. But the machine can do anything. It can build games and run games. It can do machine learning models. It can do visuals. It can simply send emails to your friends. The possibilities are endless, and we'll explore those topics in our projects coming up in the course. Welcome back. The next code editor we're going to look at is a very, very popular one. It's completely free. So I think right now it's probably the most popular code editor out there in the community, and I think you'll see why. We can download it based on your machine, so you can pick whatever computer you have. In my case, we'll download it for Mac, and it has a really, really good Get Started guide. Again, all these tools have a lot of information online for them. So again, if you get stuck with downloads, there's always a way for you to figure out how to solve these. Now, keep in mind with code editors, it doesn't just mean these are for Python. Both Sublime Text and Visual Studio Code can write any sort of language, programming language that you want. Like myself, I usually like writing JavaScript as well. So I can go back and forth between different languages, but still use the same tools. So let's open up VS Code. We're going to install this. And again, on Windows, it'll be very similar. You'll go through an installer. In my case, I'll add it to my applications. In my case, it should appear somewhere around here. Click on that. And there you go. We have Visual Studio Code. There's a lot more going on than Sublime Text. It's why I actually prefer Sublime Text. There's just less things happening on the screen. But you can see over here that has some really nice features. For example, we can create a new file here, and we can just create, let's say, a Python file. So I'm going to Command S and save and just call it hello.py because we want to create a Python file. You'll see right away when I do that, it's going to tell me, hey, there's no Python interpreter selected. You need to select a Python interpreter. And luckily, we actually learned what that means, right? So let's select a Python interpreter and look at that. It tells me that I have a choice because we've downloaded version 3.7, but on my Mac, I also have the pre-installed 2.7. So luckily, Visual Studio Code tells me, hey, which one do you want to use? And I'm going to say, I want to use Python 3. There you go. And I get another hint. It says, hey, we also have a linter available for Python. Do you want to install that extension as well? We'll get to that in a bit. But for now, let's focus on this. If I do print hello, getting really creative with my code here, you see that, again, I have syntax highlighting. Everything looks good. If I miss a bracket, what happens? Do I get any errors? What if I just write some gibberish here? I'm not getting anything because, well, I don't have this pylint installed. But again, we'll get to linting in a bit. The cool thing about Visual Studio Code is that you also have the terminal right here. You can actually, if this isn't open for you, you can just click Terminal and just say New Terminal. Now in here, I'm going to close this for now. I can run my Python code, and let's make sure it's just a print. I can say Python hello.py. If I click run, oh, I didn't save this, so make sure I save it so it's the new version. And run this again, Python hello.py. And look at that, it's all working. Now, up to this point, we have this print hello. We also know that we're running Python version 3.7. You can see here, if I click on here, I can select what interpreter I want to use. And it also gives us a few tips, such as, hey, linter pylint is not installed. So let's install pylint. Pylint is a linter. That is, it's almost as a spell checker for our code, letting us know, is this syntax right? And there are many versions of linters available for Python. PyLint just happens to be one of the most popular. And VS Code by default suggests PyLint, so let's install that. Once that's installed, you see over here that everything is going through. And now let's see if this works. So let's save this file. I'm going to say File, Save. And if I click on Problems here, there are no problems detected so far, but we know that the print should have brackets around it. So what we want to do here is go to View, Command Palette, and we see right away that it says Python enabled linting. If I type Python here, the Python installer that we had at the beginning when we installed VS Code installed a whole bunch of shortcuts and tools for us to use, such as enable linting. So let's click on that, and I'm going to say on. If I save, look at that. In my problems, it says missing parentheses in call to print. Did you mean print hello? I also get this little underline, and it tells me exactly what print does, but also telling me what errors I need to fix. And you see that it's a PyLint syntax error. So again, I can just fix that, nice and easy. And now if I save, there's no problems. Everything is running fine. If I go to my terminal and do python hello.py, look at that. Everything is working nicely. So this problems panel is really nice for your code to be told, hey, something's wrong. For example, if I miss a bracket here and I save, the problems is going to tell me, hey, there's something going on. There's a syntax error. And PyLint is helping me solve that issue. By the way, you might be asking yourself, how come my editor, VS Code, doesn't look like this? For example, if I go to extensions, I have the Dracula official theme enabled now, which is a color theme that I have for Visual Studio Code. And let's click on this over here and just say disable all installed extensions. You'll see that I just have a few extensions that allow my Visual Studio Code to be customized. But in your case, if you're just installing Visual Studio Code, it'll look something like this. But by installing the Python package with the PyLint, we now have a fully enabled IDE, in a sense, for us to write Python code. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Up until now, we've talked about Sublime Text and Visual Studio Code. Code editors that we had to install a bunch of plugins and extensions in order to customize it to what we want. And they work really well with a ton of different programming languages. The next one, though, is an IDE, and it's called PyCharm. And it's probably the most popular tool for Python developers. So I really like it. But it's an IDE. That is, unlike a code editor, it already comes pre-built with a lot of things. This company, JetBrains, makes it, and they focus purely on Python developers. So that is, if you're a Python developer, they really focus and make sure that all the tools you need to succeed are in here. Now, when you click on Download Now, you have two versions. The professional one, which you have to pay for, and the community one. So just download the community one. The professional one just comes with a few extra features that we don't really need. So download the community one. Just a heads up, it's a lot bigger. It's 315 megabytes. So again, it comes with a lot more tools for us to use. So it is a little bit heavier than Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text. But if you're a Python developer and you just want an environment where you can do everything in one place, PyCharm is the way to go. Now let's fast forward through this so that we're not waiting around for the download. Whew. All right. That was a long pause for me, but for you, with some editing, this should have been quick. All right. If I open this up now, again, if you're on Windows or if you're on Mac, installation process will be different. In our case, because we are on a Mac, I just drag this to application. With Windows, you'll probably go through an installer. All right, it's all installed. Now, if I double click, PyCharm is going to open up for me. And we'll just make sure we allow it. Now, in my case, I had already a previous version of PyCharm that I've been using. And you might want to import your previous setting. But in our case, we've never used PyCharm before. And also, most likely you want a fresh install. So even if you get this type of pop-up, you can just click on Do Not Import Settings so you get a fresh slate. We're going to click OK. And there we have it. And right away, you can see that, well, it gives us a lot of options. Let's just say I've never used PyCharm before. And next, we get to choose our UI. Do we want Dracula, which is dark, or do we want light? Let's go with dark for now. So I'm going to skip the remaining and set defaults. So in PyCharm now, we can create a new project. Now in here, it asks us where we want to create our project. In my case, we can just leave it over here. We'll call it my project. And before we click create, make sure that you click on this project interpreter and double check that our base interpreter is using Python 3. Remember, if you're on a Mac or Linux, you might have Python 2 already installed. In our case, we installed our Python version 3.7 right here. So we make sure that this latest version of Python is what's being used as the interpreter. Now we can just click create, and our project is going to start for us. We can close these tips. Every once in a while you get tip of the day. Because this is an IDE, you get a lot of features that you can read about online. So it might take you a while to get used to PyCharm, but it is a very powerful tool. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Now, with my project here, I can right-click, say New, and then select File. Our file, we'll just call it hi-hi.py. Click OK. And there we go. We have our first file opened up, and we can just, once again, say print. Now, this is definitely way too small. So I'm going to go to PyCharm, Preferences, and here it gives you a ton of options to customize PyCharm to your liking. In my case, I want to make sure that I use, let's say, a custom font, but definitely increase the size to, let's go with 18. How's that? Let's apply. That's better. You know what? I want even bigger. Let's do 20. I'm going to hit OK. All right, this side is now bigger. That's great. We can see it, but this is still tiny. I want this a little bit bigger, so let's fix that as well. We can fix this easily by pressing Command and then using the mouse wheel if you have a mouse, or using 2 fingers and zooming in. Like so. If you're on a Windows machine, it'll be Control instead of Command, and just zooming in and out as you like. Now, the interesting thing here with PyCharm, I know we have a ton of things that we might not be familiar with right now, but the key thing is that Python 3.7 is running our project, and if we type something like print, hey, we get a ton of interesting things. First, we get a typo saying, hey, this whole hey is not an English word. If I add spaces, look at that. It even gives me typos of English words. But then I also have this yellow curly bracket or squiggly line. And it tells me pip8, no new line at the end of the file. This is something that we're going to talk about shortly when we talk about formatting our code. But if I add a new line, look at that. Everything is working smoothly. I get a nice little check mark. Now I can run this code by going to Run and then clicking Run. And you can see the shortcut command here as well. If I run this, ask me, hey, what do you want to run? Well, I want to run the new hi-hi Python file. I click on this, And look at that. Let's make this a little bit bigger. That's better. We see that our file is being run. The process finished with exit code 0. 0 is a good sign. It means there were no errors and everything is great. Now, if we make an error here, and let's say I miss my brackets and I hit run, or I can just click on run here. Look at that. It gives me an error saying, hey, syntax error. Unexpected EOF while parsing, and tells you something went wrong. So once again, I can fix it, run my code, and everything is good. There are a lot of features here that you can explore on your own, get comfortable with it. PyCharm is definitely a great IDE. And the beauty is that unlike Sublime Text or Visual Studio Code, where we had to install all these packages, PyCharm comes, well, with everything built in. It's an IDE. We don't have to install any of these packages. This environment is already set up for us to work professionally with Python because it is made for Python developers. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Let's talk about formatting. That is code formatting. A very important tool that comes with a lot of IDEs, and you can also add extensions to code editors like Visual Studio Code to format code. Now, in order for us to talk about that, we have to talk about Python pep. And if you Google Python pep, you'll get something like this. PEP stands for Python Enhancement Proposals. These are proposals that the community, the Python developer community, gives in order for us to have a standardized way to write code. And one of the more popular ones, if you scroll down, is what we call the PEP 8. You can see that there's a lot of PEP numbers. Well, PEP 8 is the most popular one, and it's a style guide for Python code. It tells us this is what good, clean Python code should look like. But luckily for you, you don't have to click through here and read every single thing. I mean, it is a lot. Code editors and IDEs help us with this. Let's have a look. I have a piece of code here in my hello.py file. I mean, it doesn't look that bad, but how do we know if we're formatting the code according to PEP 8? Well, very easily. We can run our command palette, or we can use a shortcut here, Command-Shift-P, or Control-Shift-P if you're on Windows. And then if we type in format, document, and click here, we'll get, hey, formatter AutoPip8 is not installed. Do you want to install it? And AutoPip8 is a popular package with VS Code or extension that gives us the PEP8 formatter. So let's install this. Now, let's once again run the format document. And did you see that? Our code changed quite a bit. We have some spaces, some formatting that went on. And it did that automatically because of PEP8. As soon as I change something, let's add some spaces here, like that, make our code just formatted really strange. I click save, and let's once again, Command-Shift-V, format document. Now let's save this, and here, PEP8 formatting style was added. For example, with PEP8, it recommends that when you write functions that you have 2 spaces following it. So 2 spaces after every function. Once again, if I remove this and do format document, you see that a space is added because of our auto PEP8 package. Very, very cool. And you can also set this up so it does this automatically on save. I'll leave that one to you to customize your editor in the way that you want. Now, if we go to PyCharm, again, we have the same code over here, just larger text, already has this installed for us. As a matter of fact, you can see the underline here and says PEP8. Hey, I expected 2 blank lines after class or function definition. So it actually tells you that, all right, this is not good according to pip8. Or maybe we can add extra spaces here. And right away, look at that, pip8. Multiple spaces after keyword. We don't want that. Now, all we have to do here is simply go to Code and reformat code. And you can also see this shortcut available. If I do this, look at that. The code was reformatted. Let's make this a little smaller. And everything seems to be working. And I also get a little error. This is not pip8. Again, it's another suggestion by the editor telling me that you've created a new function sum. But sum actually exists in Python. So you're almost overwriting this. Again, a really, really neat feature of PyCharm. And you know what? Just because we have a little bit of time, just to show you how you can use VS Code to just save or format on save, I can simply go to Preferences, Settings, and type in Format. And if I scroll to Format on Save, I can click on that. You can see that changes have been automatically implemented. So now every time I do Command S and save, look at that. It formats it for me so that we can make sure that we write clean Python code according to the standards. Let's take a break and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Let's talk about the very last one, the Jupyter Notebooks. Now, this one is really, really interesting. And it's very popular with data scientists and machine learning people because, well, let me show you instead of explaining it. In order for us to use Jupyter Notebooks, we can actually go to anaconda.com. No, this isn't a snake website. This is a distribution, a platform that allows us to download a ton of tools that Python engineers use. And like I said before, a lot of data scientists, a lot of people who are working with machine learning would download Anaconda because it comes with all these tools that we need to be productive instead of downloading them one by one. And here's the thing. You can actually just download Python with Anaconda. So if we didn't go to python.org initially and just went to Anaconda and clicked download, well, that was going to install Python for us as well. But I wanted us to go through the official way of downloading it instead of Anaconda because we want to understand how things work. So in here, all we have to do is click download and you'll be able to download the Anaconda distribution. And you can see that it's the most popular Python in our data science platform. And you can see that when you download Anaconda, it comes with a lot of things that we're going to use throughout the course, such as Jupyter Notebooks. It comes with different plugins like NumPy, or Bokeh, or Pandas, or even TensorFlow. A lot of things that data scientists use. Now, if you scroll down, it will detect whatever machine you're on. So you can download based on your version. So if you're on a Windows, you might have to click Windows and make sure you download version 3.7 or higher, and based on whatever computer you have. Most of you will probably have 64-bit. That's something dependent on your machine. If you're on Linux, again, you'll have different options as well. Now, you can click on download here, or you can even click on documentation, read more, and go to installation. Here we'll have a step-by-step guide on how to install Anaconda. Now, I want to give you a warning. You don't have to do this optional number 2 step, which is to verify data integrity. This is something that you do for security reasons to make sure that you're downloading the right package. So that is completely optional. You can skip it over and you can walk through the steps to make sure that you install it properly. Now, one of the things that you'll get is this option, especially on Windows, to add Anaconda to my path environment variable. I recommend, and they do as well, to not click here. Because remember, we've installed Python initially already. So by clicking that and adding it to the path, it's going to conflict with an older version of Python that you may have installed a couple of lessons ago. So make sure you follow this guide and you see that Anaconda recently announced that they're going to include PyCharm for Anaconda as well. So again, if in the previous video you've already downloaded PyCharm, you can skip over this step as well. So that's the thing with Windows. With Mac, again, it's very self-explanatory. You just click through the process, install, and everything will be done for you. And if you're on a Linux machine, you will have to use your terminal and essentially have to run this command that they'll give you in order to run Anaconda. And remember, we want to use Anaconda 3 because we want to use Python version 3. Now, once you have installed Anaconda, I'm going to give you a warning. It's a pretty big distribution. It is quite big. So if your computer doesn't have enough memory, doesn't have enough storage, there is another option, which is Miniconda, which is a smaller version of Anaconda that doesn't come with all these packages. And most likely in this course, you can get away with just running Miniconda as an option. Now, let's say you've installed Anaconda. You should have it in your applications right here. All you need to do is simply click on it, and it's going to launch Anaconda for you. Now, it might take a little while just to get everything set up, but once it's on, look at that. You have the Anaconda Navigator, and you have a few things here that you might recognize, such as VS Code. You can actually install it through here. You can use things like Spider, another IDE like PyCharm. You can also have things like RStudio if you want to get into R programming and really focus on data science. But the one we're really interested in is the Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebooks are extremely popular notebooks that if you're doing any sort of data science or machine learning with Python, you're for sure using. I love them, and you'll see why in just a second. Now, you might have to install this if it wasn't installed, but otherwise, once installed, you can just click on Launch, and let's see what happens. Did you see that? It opened up my browser, my default browser, and it took me to localhost 8888. Now, if this doesn't happen for you automatically, you might have to just type in manually into the browser localhost 8888. But otherwise, it's going to open up this for me, which right now, if you look at it, we're in our desktop. I can open my Python files if I want to. If I click on them, look at that. I get my Python files that I can edit and type things into. But this isn't really why we want to use Jupyter Notebooks. Instead, we want to create a new Jupyter Notebook. I'm going to click on New and make sure that we select Python 3. Once I click on Python 3, we get a new Jupyter Notebook. And this notebook, which is untitled, we can just name it My First Notebook. I'm going to rename and check this out. If I go to my desktop, I have some folders here. I have a hidden folder, which is the checkpoints folder, which is Jupyter Notebooks keeping track of my files. And then I also have my first notebook.ipynb. This stands for IPython Notebooks, which is what Jupyter Notebooks used to be called. As you notice, they are not .py Python files. There's a special type of file, the IPython Notebook file, which can be opened with Jupyter Notebooks. Now, the reason we have a browser here is that Jupyter Notebooks needs a GUI, or graphical user interface, for us to write this. It's not a code editor where we have the code editor screens. Instead, it's using the browser to allow us to run this program. Even though it's using the browser, though, you're able to run this offline. So if you're on an airplane, you can still run your Jupyter Notebooks and practice coding. Now, the way Jupyter Notebook works is using these cells. So these cells I can print, or I can write different code in Python. So if I do this, I can click Run, and look at that. Right away, it gives me the output. And now I have a second cell where I can say, let's say 4 plus 5. If I run this, look at that. I run a different cell with a different output. Now, instead of us always constantly running run, we can also just use the shortcut Shift and Enter to actually run the code. So let's say, for example, we're doing is 5 greater than 4. I can run Shift Enter and it gives me the answer right away. Now, the beauty here is that it's almost like creating notes for yourself, right? I'm able to run different cells, see different outputs, get immediate response to my code instead of in a code editor or an IDE where I had to write everything in one file and everything ran at once. And as we get into machine learning and data science and data visualization, we'll actually see that we use Jupyter Notebooks because they're so easy to visualize these results. Now, one other thing with Jupyter Notebooks that is really, really nice is this idea of the notebook, where instead of just always having code, which you can see over here, if I click on the drop-down menu and click Markdown, I can now type text like, "This is my first Python or Jupyter notebook." And I can write different sort of notes here. And once done, I can do Shift Enter. And look at that. I have my notes in this book. So that maybe as you're learning for the rest of the course, you can have different Jupyter notebooks to take notes, run code, verify it, and, well, be extremely organized. And you can even post these on GitHub and share them with other community members. And all we have to do now is, well, it automatically saves. So you can see over here that anytime we open Jupyter Notebooks, let's actually do that. I'm going to close this as well. Yes, let's quit. I'm going to open Jupyter Notebooks one more time. By clicking on Anaconda, it's initializing, takes a bit of time, but eventually I can launch my Jupyter Notebook. Again, it's going to open up my Jupyter Notebook on localhost. You'll see over here that the localhost has changed to 8889. So that may happen if, for example, localhost 888 is already taken. But if I click here on the Jupyter Notebook, remember the IPython notebook, I go back to my Jupyter Notebook with all my text, all my files. How cool is that? And by the way, going back to this localhost, the reason that this is actually still taken is, well, if you look over here, I have 2 terminal windows because I technically didn't close the session or the server from last time. So because I did that, Anaconda automatically said, oh yeah, localhost 8888 is already taken, so let's just increase the number to 8889. So you want to make sure that you close these once you are done. And when I do that, it tells me connection failed because we've stopped the server. It no longer works. So if I type something here, you see that I get a star and it's not doing anything. If I do 4 + 5, again, it's not running because the server is no longer running. All right, let's take a break and I'll see you in the next one. There we have it. We went over a professional Python developer setup. Now you must be asking yourself, there's so many things that I want to do. I want to optimize my code editors, my terminal to have a certain look and feel. I want to have different extensions. There's so many extensions and plugins that you can take. But the beauty is that what you want and what you like evolves over time. And you'll have to customize your terminal or command prompt to different ways, different color schemes, having different tools available to you. You might prefer the lightness of code editors and keep things simple without having all that weight of something like an IDE, PyCharm, that takes a bit of time to get used to. That's why I personally like Sublime Text. Nice, really lightweight, and whenever I need a plugin or extension, I can install it and just use that. Or you might prefer using Jupyter Notebooks because it's a really great way to stay organized, take notes, and also run your small little code snippets, multiple code snippets in different cells. What you pick is up to you. My job was to show you the tools that are available and the tools that are being used by professional developers. But everybody's different. There's no right way, no right tool that is better than all the rest. So what I recommend is have your terminal or command prompt or PowerShell set up properly to your liking, and make sure that you get Jupyter notebooks. But when it comes to code editors or IDEs, just pick one that you like, maybe even try Spyder if you want, and stick with that. Because as you spend more time coding in one environment, you'll get better and better and more used to it. So as a final exercise for this section, pick one of these code editors or IDEs and customize it to your liking. Make it just right. And once you do that, trust me, it's like every time you code, you enter your home with all your favorite tools, furnitures, and things. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.